now I had to cut that around that drain there and start shooting the video here again now. I had to cut around the drain and cut the little piece of the field on the other side. Got that done. Now I'm on auto steer so I can hold the camera, and I'm not using a GoPro or anything right now. But anyway, back to the point I was trying to make was that, yeah, I basically gave up no-till to go organic, and I didn't know how to do organic no-till, and I really struggled with the concept of going back to tillage, but I've had to because I didn't know how else to control weeds, and so I've been struggling against perennial weeds, especially like mostly Canada thistle and some quackgrass. So I got Canada thistle in this field. You can see them here, but actually they must have got hurt really bad because, like I said, I cut it last year, I think on a full moon, and never did any tillage at all until all the way the next year into June, and then I did 2 tillage passes and seeded it. And you know, there's thistle here, but they're not, I mean, they're not like super terrible thick and choked everything completely out. They did, here is a pretty pronounced patch, but they're all small, and we've had a lot of rain this year, but yet they're stunted, they're small, and there's a lot of ones with purple flowers. Those are kind of new. I don't know if they're new seedlings that sprouted this year and then came or whatever, but I'm whacking them off on this conjunction moon. And the idea of cutting on the moon, which is kind of one of the points I was trying to get to eventually here in this video, is that when you have the moon in conjunction or in opposition, which conjunction is basically when you can't see the moon, it's completely occluded because there's no, it's in between the sun and the earth, so you can't see it. That's an alignment, and the forces of the sun and the moon are combined together, which causes the increase in the water level in the soil and in the plants. So the water's moving up in that stem of that thistle, and you come along and you cut it now, and the water's like trying to boil up out of that stem at this time, and that's what you want, because the theory is that then acetic acid, like apple cider vinegar, you know, basically the same idea. Acetic acid starts to form in that water in that stem, and that acetic acid actually raises cane on the thistle and down into the root. And I think it probably does, because I've been seeing really pretty pronounced reduction in thistle stands just from timing the swathing. I actually farm by the moon that way, paying attention to what I'm doing, my seeding times and my cutting times, because I know I have more moisture available then for whatever starting a crop, and also getting these thistles under control. So I'm just kind of documenting what I'm doing here, but now thinking about all this tillage and the destruction, and you know, now typically you'd come in here after harvest and spike this with a chisel plow, rip it, try to rip those roots out and drag the roots out on top, and you know, but the problem is the thistle, every time you cut the root, it's like cutting a snake's head off. All of a sudden you got 7 heads pop up in its place, you know. So every piece of thistle you cut off and drag around, you start a new plant. So you actually can increase your thistle stands with tillage too, which I think is maybe it's partly what some of these purple, you know, less mature thistle plants probably are from, is probably from, you know, from the two diskings. There was shoots that got cut off from the main plant. Now they're trying to establish their, you know, place where they're taking a leak on the fire hydrant, so does the tree. They're trying to, mark out their territory and start their own patch too. And so I look at all this and just thinking, well, either you need to do tillage or you need to come in here and use a herbicide of some kind. Well, I'm not a chemical farmer anymore. I haven't sprayed herbicides since 2013, I believe it was, and I have found some OMRI-listed organic certified materials you can use now. One's called Demise. I really like to use it, but it's, and another one's Suppress. I'd like to try that too. And I'm pretty sure if we get warm weather, I could burn the top growth of these plants and at least keep them from translocating solar energy down into the root and building carbohydrates in the root so they can come back stronger next year. Just by burning them off, you can do damage. But I was thinking about all that, thinking about the struggle and all the tillage and everything. I decided yesterday, I made the executive decision. I'm going to try seeding some winter wheat or winter rye or maybe triticale, winter triticale, with an old drill that I have. It's been sitting for 3 years already. I haven't used it, or 3-4 years since I used it. It's called the till drill. It's actually I've got what do I got? I think I got 13-inch wide sweeps for it. Well, this is a pretty steep ditch to go through. I'm gonna have to cut it out. I got 13-inch wide sweeps, and I'm gonna seed with that. And it'll just go along and undercut all these weeds, just the depth of seeding, like 1.5 inches to 2 inches, something like that. And that's what I'm going to try to do. I'm going to try to just direct seed it with that drill into winter wheat. Forget the herbicide pass, because that's another thing you got to get done. And just one and done. Just hook onto that drill and load it with seed, and maybe try to get some kind of fertility down with the wheat seed, and just come in here and seed it and see what I get. What's the worst that could happen? That you don't get a good stand, and next year you have to tear it up and start over. Well, so at least you got a cover crop going that's going to hold the soil during the winter, and you got a live root in the ground, and you got living soil, something living on the soil, instead of just fallow, dead soil blowing away all winter long in the wind. And I mean, if you don't do anything, of course, the weeds, you got to have something competing with the weeds. The thing is that nature doesn't like to be bare. The soil doesn't like to be stripped bare and left naked, So to be a good husband, you want to take care of your bride, your wife, your beloved. So you want to try to keep her protected as much as you can, and feed her and nourish her. So, and the roots, even the weeds are feeding the soil basically. I mean, that's why they're there. They're building soil. They're pulling up nutrients from deeper in the soil profile, and exuding acids off the roots that's breaking down the rock and the soil and turning it into black soil. I mean, it takes a long time, but that's really what's going on. And so now this is a saline weep here along this water ravine here. It's a natural ravine, and but the water wicks up. The water moves up in the soil like a wick all around all the sloughs. So much of the farmland around the country now is it's becoming unproductive. It's turning into, like right here is the salt wick. Well, the problem with conventional chemical farming is you're pouring nothing but salts on constantly all year long. All the passes, I don't know how many spray passes on average are done now, but it's a lot. And almost everything is a salt-based fertilizer or chemical. So you're pouring all these salts onto the ground, and salt is water soluble. So of course the salt follows the water, so it goes from the top of the hills and down and washes its way through the soil, carrying all these salts and takes them down into the low areas where the water goes, and then whatever water does infiltrate into the ground in those areas, it it eventually wicks back up around the edges of the slough like a wick in a lamp. The water wicks up around the edges of the sloughs, and when it does, the salts go with the water, and then the water evaporates, so all the salts don't evaporate. So now you got a big salt lick all around all your best. That's some of your most productive, best land, and we're desertifying it, turning it into a desert, a salt, big salt flat, basically type of thing. And yeah, it's insanity the way that we're farming. I mean, we think we're so smart, and we're getting all the big payments, or the government's subsidizing it because of the fertilizer and the chemical companies and the pharmaceutical companies, which are what the chemical companies are, the same ones that make aspirin, are the same ones that are making and controlling the seed and controlling the farm ag chemicals, and the colleges and the education and the whole thing, and the government and the US as Joe Soliton calls it, USDA. I mean, it's all controlled and manipulated by big money, big ag, big pharma. So yeah, when you come out here and do it different, I mean, yeah, you got a target on your head, and it comes with the territory. I think, I don't know, maybe we're targeted more than we know. I think it's something to be aware about. You could be targeted in lots of different ways and not even know it. But I'm getting a little off track in my video. I do want to come here and no-till this winter wheat in here, and I'll undercut these thistles, and then the wheat. Hopefully you can feed the wheat enough to outcompete the thistles until you can come in here and then do the same thing, cut the wheat, and whatever thistles survive, coming up through all that wheat, whack them off again with the windrower on a full moon, and maybe I can get ahead of the game. That's kind of my plan. So that was the purpose of making the video, was just talking about the moon phases, and the water's moving up in the soil in this moon phase right now. And I observed that. I mean, I don't know that I can prove it, but by observation, I'm sure that's what I see. Because I've noticed when you're working the ground with tillage, especially in the evening, you can literally see the top of the ground becomes like, it actually becomes, it becomes wet looking, At night you can see it, especially at night you can see it, the water, because the water's coming up. And water moves up in the spring anyway, don't get me wrong. I mean, you got some natural wicking or migration of water coming up in the soil anyway, but it's definitely much more pronounced when you have a moon from what I've seen. If somebody can prove me wrong, I'd love to hear, I'd love to see the evidence. But from what I've been able to observe and see, that's my conclusion at this point. And I still got weeds, but I used 0 herbicides here. I have not used a herbicide here for over 10 years. So, it's not like it's complete weeds. Yeah, sure, we're drowned out here, but guess what? The chemical guys got weeds everywhere too. And just look where they miss with their chemical, what they got. I could take you over here and show you that. It's not good, so it's yeah, it's not so bad. At least I didn't spend $50 an acre on chemicals, or 100.